Awareness alone is curative. What this means is exactly what it sounds like. It means that you don't necessarily need to plan and work really hard to let go of unwanted behaviors. In fact, what it means is that any unhealthy behavior that you have will autocorrect in time merely through the process of observation, which is what awareness essentially is. It's simply observation. So we need to draw a distinction here between you trying to actively change some aspect of your life, like maybe you're trying to quit smoking or overeating, or you're trying to become more confident, or you're trying to be more responsible with your finances, something like this, right? Whatever your issue is, doesn't matter. But usually it's like when you have this problem, you're looking for an active solution to it. Well, there's an interesting alternative. And the interesting alternative is just to take the light of your awareness and to shine it on the problem, trusting that with sufficient awareness, the problem will simply dissolve. It's actually not possible to engage in an unhealthy behavior while you're fully conscious. Think about this. Actually, if you are trying to engage in unhealthy behavior, whatever you deem that to be, so smoking, drinking, partying, porn, gambling, whatever, and you can't seem to help yourself, you can't seem to stop it, right? What this principle is saying is that the reason you can't stop it is because you're doing it without awareness. If you were to do it with full awareness, the behavior could not be continued. It would have to stop on its own accord. Now, there's a catch. And the catch is that for this to work, it requires constant awareness, right? A certain duration of awareness. You can't just be aware for a second or a minute. You have to be aware throughout the whole thing. So what this principle is saying in practice, let me give you an example, is it's saying that if you're smoking, and usually you and everyone around you consider smoking to be an unhealthy activity, so you probably are aware that it's unhealthy, but when you smoke, you're not really fully aware of it. So what this principle is telling you is that if you were to smoke without trying to change anything about how you're smoking, without trying to force yourself to stop, if you were just to smoke with full awareness, fully consciously, over and over and over and over again, you would not actually be able to continue to put that cigarette in your mouth. At some point, it would just hit you like a lightning bolt to the head. It's like, wait a minute, what am I doing here? What am I doing? What am I thinking? What am I doing? And you would just put it down, because the awareness would reveal the damage that this is doing to yourself to such an extent that you couldn't really authentically, genuinely continue the behavior. But for that to happen, like I said, the catch is that it requires constant awareness. It's not enough just to say, oh yeah, I know smoking's bad for me, and then just to continue to smoke unconsciously. That's not going to work. The other catch here, with the broader principle that awareness alone is curative, is that awareness isn't as easy as you think it is. You might think awareness, oh, that's easy. I got that handled. I can do awareness, Leo. No, you don't realize yet how little awareness you have. And in fact, even though the principle is solid and it works, it's kind of like the law of gravity. It always works. The problem is that you just don't have sufficient awareness to be able to actually follow through on it. That's the real catch here. And also it requires patience. So this awareness, it doesn't work in 5 seconds, and it probably won't work for you in 5 minutes. It requires a constant application over time, which you might not have that sort of patience or that sort of consistency. So the example I want to use here is going to be eating junk food, but I want you to realize that this is just an example and that we're talking about a much broader principle, in that any other example you can think of that's sort of along these lines will work just the same. You're sitting at a nice restaurant, your favorite restaurant, with all your friends on a Friday night, and you really want to splurge tonight. So you ordered the double extra greasy 1.5 pound cheeseburger with double cheese and double bacon and ranch dressing and barbecue sauce and a big thing of fries and onion rings, and you got a 1,000-calorie milkshake, and this is like your favorite meal, and you're just, you're gonna splurge yourself tonight because you worked hard all week. Then when the waitress brings over your burger, you're gonna sit there and you're gonna eat it. Now you're gonna do it not like you normally would. You're gonna do it with full awareness. So here what you do is you look at this burger and you just sit there and you look at the grease dripping down from it, and you just look at it with full awareness. Now, as you're doing this, you're not judging yourself, nor are you judging the situation. So you're not telling yourself, this is bad, I shouldn't be doing this. No, just the opposite. You let yourself do it. No judgments at all, but you do it with awareness, right? You see the grease dripping down the burger, and then you take your first bite, and you notice that bite going down, and you already notice that bite, there's something a little bit dirty about it. It doesn't feel quite right. But anyways, it's also enjoyable, so you notice that too. And then you take the next bite and the next bite, and you're just noticing how this thing is making you feel. And then, as you're eating more and more and more, and you feel like all of a sudden you're full now, but still you're taking more and more bites. And so you just sit there and you mindfully watch that. You observe it. And then you notice yourself starting to feel nauseous, starting to feel sick, starting to feel heavy and sleepy and achy and bloated, and maybe you're happy. One of the really shocking things you'll learn if you start to practice this principle in your life is just how unaware you ordinarily are, especially when you're doing these unwanted behaviors. Really, the only way you can engage in unwanted and unhealthy behaviors is by not being aware. And usually there's actually mechanisms you have that facilitate this, right? There's things you do when you're doing something unhealthy to distract your awareness from the fact that you're doing something unhealthy. So when you sit down at the television with a gallon bucket of ice cream and your favorite TV show, and you're going to watch 6 hours of it while eating ice cream, well, it's like you kind of just get sucked into the TV show. You just kind of like totally let go. You become totally unconscious. You surrender to it. And that's the only way you can do that. That's the only way you can sit through that highly unhealthy behavior, right? Because if you sat there for 6 hours fully conscious of how much you're wasting your life, how much you're wasting your health, all the other things you could have been doing with your time, and how higher consciousness you could have been feeling, then it would have been too painful for you to continue that behavior. You would have just had to push the off button at some point. So one big point of confusion that people make here is that they assume that awareness is the same thing as logical knowing. It's not. So a smoker logically knows that smoking a cigarette is bad for them. But that doesn't really do anything. That doesn't change their behavior. And you might know that eating a greasy cheeseburger that has 3,000 calories of bacon in it probably isn't good for your health. You know that. But that's not awareness. Awareness is something very, very different. Awareness is a in-the-moment observation of what's happening. Knowing is something like a memory. You can just know a fact and store it in the back of your mind, and you can then pull it up once in a while. That's not awareness. Awareness is right now. Are you aware right now as you're engaged in whatever activity, whatever the activity is, as you're engaged in it? Are you aware of what you're doing? And that is a skill. You have what we might call an awareness muscle in your mind. And this muscle is flexed every time that you are being consistently aware. And then when you stop flexing the muscle, your awareness just kind of like goes away, dies off, and you go unconscious for a few minutes or a few hours or a few days or a few years, you go unconscious. If you want to eliminate the deep underlying neurotic needs that you have, which are the sources of these unwanted behaviors, the only way to do that is by shining and penetrating those with the light of your awareness. Observation. Awareness here, don't take it as some, fruity new age woo-woo concept. It's really not. It's just observation. It's kind of like, if you went outside and you wanted to observe the birds and you just wanted to observe the mating pattern of birds in the neighborhood, what would you do? You'd have to go outside, have to grab a lawn chair, sit on the lawn and just watch birds all day. It would be kind of boring. It would not be very interesting. But as you were doing that, eventually you would learn. You would actually learn oh, that bird, I've seen that bird before. That specific bird, it has a little feather sticking out of its head in a weird way, or it has a broken foot or something. I've seen that bird before. That happens just because you're observing a lot. After a lot of observation, you become familiar with things. You start to see the patterns of how things work. That's the power of observation, right? That's very, very different than just reading in a book something about a bird. Very different. Another qualification here is that being aware is not the same thing as moralizing. Not at all. So remember that in this example that I gave you with eating junk food, you're not sitting there. I'm not telling you to sit there and say, oh, I shouldn't eat that. And this thing is super bad for me. This bacon, I've read in a book that bacon is terrible for my heart. And, oh, this is going to make me so fat and I don't want to be fat. All of that stuff, that's not awareness. That's actually unawareness. Moralizing is actually one of the major unwanted behaviors that you should be concerned about with unwiring. And one of the ways that you can unwire moralizing is simply through awareness. Also, another qualification is that awareness is not suppression. So I'm not telling you to suppress anything here. I'm not telling you to suppress your desires, even the bad, quote unquote, bad or evil or shady desires that you have. I'm not telling you to suppress those. So what I'm telling you is actually quite the opposite. If you have a real desire to have sex or to watch some porn or watch a 6-hour marathon of your favorite show while eating a bucket of ice cream, do that. Do it. Don't hold yourself back. As you're doing it, be aware though. You see? Don't try to stop yourself. The mistake, the very big mistake that people make when they're trying to be aware is that as they're being aware, they're also at the same time manipulating their behavior to try to come to the best outcome possible. So it's like if you sat down and you're like, okay, Leo, I'm going to do what you said. So I'm sitting here with my gallon of ice cream and I'm eating it a little bit and I'm watching my TV. And now Leo told me that, awareness alone is curative. So I'm going to be aware of this. But as I'm aware, wouldn't it also be nice if I just actually resisted it? Leo, shouldn't I just resist it and tell myself to put it away? And what I'm telling you here is no, don't do that. Do what you naturally want to do. So if you naturally want to eat the whole bucket, eat the whole bucket, but be aware while you're eating the whole bucket. Notice that awareness here is a very hands-off activity. It's very passive. Like I said, if a scientist was observing birds outside and trying to describe accurately their mating behaviors, the scientist wouldn't go and run up to the birds and try to interfere and force them to mate by hand, right? That would be totally against the scientific method because it's so artificial. No, the scientist would sit back, he would hide himself, and he would try to make himself totally transparent and invisible to the birds so that the birds could do their thing and he could just record the actual situation. He just records it. That's what I want you to do. I want you just to record in your own mind exactly what's happening. Try adopting the principle that awareness alone is curative. And just have faith in that process. Believe that the deepest change will come from awareness of the damage that you cause yourself and from a natural desire for reality and truth. All real change comes from alignment with reality and truth. At the most fundamental level, that's what's going on when you're growing, when you're developing, when you're self-actualizing. But for that to happen, you need to develop some awareness.